One of the things that I've been exploring on this sabbatical is how we as human beings understand mountains. It's particularly important for those of us that ski. We want to be at the top of the mountain and get to the highest one that we can, ski down it, most of us, as fast as we can, but as in control as we can. And our understanding of mountains has changed over time and history. Human beings have had a love-hate relationship with mountains, and mountains through scripture come up quite a lot, one way and another, for good or for bad reasons, whether these be the worshipping of Asher poles on mountains and the sacrificing to other gods, or whether our help comes from mountains themselves. The opportunities to spend time on mountains and be still with God. And doing this, I've been looking at, reading two books in particular. One I know I've reflected on a little bit, Robert Macfarlane's Mountains of the Mind, and some of his explorations, particularly as a child, getting into those expeditions of mountains and what they have meant to him, and then his own travelling as well. But also John Jerome's On Mountains, some understanding of what mountains are, particularly from a skier's perspective. It's an old book, published in 1978, so some of the actual details are a little out of date, but he writes incredibly well, and it's really fun reading him. Robert Macfarlane starts with looking at geology and where the understanding of mountains come from in themselves, and the change that that has experienced. And my mum would probably love some of this, as geology is at the heart of a lot of what she loves to study and explore. So some of the famous geologists that Macfarlane quotes are Thomas Burnet, Georges Buffon, Charles Lyell, James Hutton, Alfred Wegener. So looking at the understanding that actually geology itself really comes down to the study of, or at least an understanding that mountains have changed and will continue to change. That actually our understanding of mountains themselves have, over history, been different. And that we need to come to grips with that, actually. That the things that we think are there forever are not, and they're very different. And John Jerome has a fantastic chapter where he actually talks about what is a mountain and how we can look at that, and he talks about some statistics. So he interestingly notes that a quarter of the Earth's surface or land area is mountainous, above 3,000 feet, that 14 million square miles of mountains. 10% are high enough or cold enough to be above the permanent snow line, something for a skier that's incredibly important to note. That this snow line is different, and I think this is one of the things that's reflected throughout both Macfarlane and Jerome, that actually mountains are relative things. It's relative to where you are, whether you're standing on a plain looking at a mountain in the distance, or whether actually you're in a range of mountains. The snow line is different across the world. So in the Andes, the snow line is at about 20,000 feet. In the Himalayas, it's about 16,000 feet. And in the Alps, it's about 8,500 feet. And altitude itself is relative. Jerome quotes that even reliable sources disagree on the heights of mountains, that there are 3 different heights for Mount Whitney in California, and all of those are completely different to the height that we have now from Google, who put it at about 14,500 feet, just over. Also, it is worth noting that Jerome's book, published in 1978, obviously is published before our extensive use of satellites and laser technology, where we can have much more accurate measuring of mountains. But even then, Everest has been hotly disputed on its height over the years. 1852, the British Survey called it 29,002 feet. And interestingly, when they were measuring it, they got a number of different measurements. So they made up they got an average measurement, which was exactly 29,000 feet, and felt that nobody would believe them, so they made it 29,002 feet. An Indian survey in 1954 measured it at about 29,028 feet, and in 1975 a Chinese survey tried to do it again and made it just over 29,029 feet. Google today has it at about 29,028 feet, measured in metres, at 8,848 metres. So, Jerome also notes that actually it's likely to change, and probably changes about a foot every 100 years. So it is still growing. So Everest is not the stable thing that we think it is. So mountains are relative.